John,
Angie,
are you up for a short game of Who Am I?
of course I am. I'm up for anything. How do we play?
Okay, it's easy. I'm going to make a statement and you're going to tell me who I am. All right, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. I am not smart enough to be a coach. Who am I?
I'm not sure.
Okay, how about I am not as good as they think I am. Who am I?
Wow, these are super unpleasant statements. I don't know. Give me one more.
Okay, I don't deserve this success.
Okay, Angie, you got me on this game. Who are you?
Okay, I am the voice of imposter syndrome.
Oh, ouch. Yes, you are. Is that a topic for this episode?
Yes, it is. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Bezignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you. From getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh. Okay. So obviously, we're making this one of our topics because I, as a coach, I see it ongoing at the highest level. And I sometimes to this day, still experience. So John, do you ever feel imposter syndrome?
Never had it. Never experienced that. Never felt like an imposter
He's so
in
full
my
of
life.
crap. Don't listen to him. This is nonsense.
It's absolutely, yeah, it's true. It's crap. Yeah. Not as much now as I used to. It's lessened, but it's still there. And interestingly, it's been said that only sociopaths and psychopaths don't experience imposter syndrome. So, I'm maybe kind of happy that I do. It's a good sign that I'm psychologically healthy and normal. But yeah,
I don't know. Wait a second. I think we're stretching it a little bit. No, I'm joking. I'm kidding you. But no, that is actually something that has been said by those, right? Like who are they? They have said, but that is very true. But there's also it's a very real, let's just call it what it is. I think sometimes it gets a little overly used as, tagline for people. But the truth is, it is very, very real. It goes beyond when we question direction or shift or change, right? It's normal for us to do that, I think, as coaches, is to want to challenge ourselves or to grow. But there's actually 4 pieces, right? If you will, there's stages and there's spaces, right? Of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I would agree. Look, imposter syndrome, I think, is always going to come up for anybody who is putting themselves out there and is concerned about doing well and wanting to be good at what they do. And not just for themselves, but for other people as well. So some of the stuff that ends up being behind imposter syndrome is, as we call it, is this fear of being found out. At some point, they're going to find out. They're going to find out I'm not good enough. They're going to find out I'm not as qualified as, or I'm not as capable as they think I am. And if you're actually not as qualified as you're supposed to be, then maybe you are an imposter. So the syndrome might be valid in that situation. So
absolutely, that is true.
There are possibly people who have imposter syndrome who should have it, but for most of us who experience it, that's not the case. And there is an opposite. There is an opposite to imposter syndrome as well. And this should be of comfort to most of the people who experience this. If you've ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's the belief that you are more competent in something than you actually are. And that tends to be from people who are at a level of ignorance to not know or understand that they're not as good as they think they are. How blessed that experience must be.
can you remember, because there was a moment for me it was just very obvious, right, that I went there. I didn't have to search for it. I had to process it. But so for you, do you have an experience that you can, you went through that like big, fat, blinding question mark?
Gosh, a number of times. I think the first experience I ever had of that really that I remember was when I was first employed as cabin crew by British Airways. And the competition, certainly at the time I joined, I don't really know what it's like now, but I think it's still fairly competitive, and it's a company people seem to want to work for. But the competition to get that role was really high, and like the chances of actually getting through and being recruited were low. And so when I actually was, I thought at some point they're going to figure out they should have hired somebody else, and that maybe I'm not quite as good as I think I am. Now, the next time after that I had that I felt that was being taken on by a coaching company that kind of headhunted me and everything. And at some point, they might realize that I don't deserve to be as far up as I am, and maybe they shouldn't be putting me in charge of all this stuff. It was just self-doubt. Ultimately, that's really what it was. It was just my doubts. It wasn't actually a lack of capability. It wasn't actually that my experience wasn't putting me there. It was somewhat of a lack of belief in myself and my abilities. And some of that was from me, and some of that was from external voices that had put me down in the past or talked me down in the past. And some of it was just a bit of fear. So these are not the only times in my life that I've had this experience by any long shot, but those are probably some of the most significant memories I have of that experience.
It's so interesting that you bring that up. You know, it happened to me when I started working with a client that literally worked for NASA, and they were uber intelligent. And in my mind, I was thinking that it wasn't that I wasn't going to be a good enough coach, that it was like I felt as though, and again, I had to process through this, but I was feeling as though I wouldn't have been able to keep up with them intellectually. And then I realized, like 2 sessions in, if I kept showing up with who I am as a coach, it didn't really matter, right? Obviously, there's other nuances that go into a great coaching, and not all of our clients are built the same, and, flex and shift energy and things like that. But it was really a big, huge aha for me of everybody puts their pan right one leg at a time. Sometimes it's 2, but we all that there was no betterment. They weren't better than me because they were, again, super intelligent, but you know what? Couldn't get out of them, like fight their way out of a wet paper bag. That's why they were in coaching, right? Coping skills, etc. And so what happened was what I realized was that I needed to stop looking to be what I was looking to be perfect in those sessions, because I felt like there was a different light on me. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that if we strive for perfection, which we know, right, and it doesn't even exist, and we shouldn't strive for perfection, because without mistakes or without being like, we'll never grow, right? Without making mistakes, without putting ourselves in those uncomfortable positions, like we're never going to grow. If we actually got it perfect, well, we're here, but where do you go from there? Comes to like, if it's truly perfect, where do you go if you're in a session with somebody? So that was one of the big, like, I remember being very nervous getting onto the first call. Like, it was physically even affecting me. And I would say that of course, I think when you don't know something or whatever, you kind of have that feeling of like, I'm nervous when you haven't experienced something. And after that point, I had never worked with somebody from NASA, right? Or that level of intellect. So now I wear it as a badge. Like, I coached that like a boss, I was badass. So it really didn't matter. So that's one. I mean, that was very specific. It was like an intellect thing. And why, right? Like, why do we allow ourselves to get into these positions or mindset of not being good enough or being found out, right? That's really the key. You mentioned it. And I think, well, how do you really keep the finger on the pulse? How do you know you're not really one of those people that should just pack it up and get out of Dodge? You should not be a coach because you are a fraud.
Yeah.
But they,
There's a good chance that, here's how I think you can tell. If you're asking yourself that question, if you know that the answer is, I'm not actually qualified or experienced enough and I'm completely out of my depth, but you're trying to fake it to make people think that you're further ahead or more qualified or more expert than you really are, then yes, we mentioned earlier, some people should have imposter syndrome. In that situation, you probably should. However, there are times when we find ourselves a bit out of our depth because we've risen to a challenge. We're not trying to fool anyone. People have seen who we are. We've been honest about who we are and what we can do. But they've offered us something that we maybe feel is, I don't know if I'm ready for that, or that this is maybe higher, more than I expected to be offered or to have put on my plate. We then may be feeling an imposter about that. I don't know if I'm up to it. Can I really do this? Can I justify their belief in me? It's all the self-doubt stuff that chances are you can, and that's your opportunity then to rise to the plate. Because there are definitely real situations in people's lives where they have misrepresented themselves. And unless you are actually misrepresenting yourself to people and dishonestly putting yourself out there, your imposter syndrome, as we are calling it here, is real. You know, you are
it's
feeling
very
like
valid. Absolutely.
you're feeling like it and it's valid, but it's not based in truth. It's just based in feeling, unless you are actually out there misrepresenting yourself.
Yeah, I think that's the real right delineation between those two things. And everything else is about, I don't know, I think I didn't have, or, when I did my very first official session, it was interesting because calling it a coaching session. So let's say this, I say to you, I have a 36 in and in the personal and human development space. A lot of that was based on being a manager and a trainer. And that's where it started. And it always naturally turned into coaching, right? What it actually is. It was coaching before we were calling it coaching back in the day. And I add that when I talk about it, and I've had people say to me, you were doing, I'm like, yeah, but do you know what I was doing in that role? My role might have been this, but this is what I was doing. And that put a little bit of doubt in my mind. Well, am I misrepresenting? And I say, no, this is where I started. But everything I did was about on the behind the scenes within the role was really about personal and professional development. Without a doubt, it was the foundation of what I was doing. So I quickly got over that because I was like, I'm not going to let other people who don't know what I've done or how I've done it decide for me whether I'm being an imposter or not, right? I'm going to go into these harder sessions. And there have been, let me ask you this. Have you ever stepped away from a client because whether it was on your own or with a company, she kind of felt like, you know what, I really can't. I'm really not ready for this depth of work, or not a good match, right? That you can't navigate. Like, have you ever done that or no?
No. The only time I've stepped away from clients has been where either I didn't feel I could serve them, or there was a real mismatch that we couldn't overcome, or where they needed something that was well beyond coaching. Other than that, no.
So here's the thing. And the reason I asked that is, so if you had continued with that person or those people, it probably would have led to imposter syndrome. It would have snuck in. Imposter syndrome is not something that we show up on a stage or in a session saying, I'm feeling imposter syndrome. What we feel is anxiety, insecure, questioning ourselves. Who am I? How do I do this? I mean, I have people that I coach, let's say on the daily almost, that, make hundreds of thousands of dollars and still don't feel worthy of that.
Yep.
They still believe that there's some twist there that because they don't deserve it, that it's somehow going to be taken away from them. Imposter syndrome shows up. It's very sneaky. It's not always obvious, right? It's not. I was doing a workshop, and I anticipated 50 people at this. It was for a big corporation, but I was only anticipating 50 people. There were like 500 people in that room. And when I tell you that when I was peeking out behind the corner and I saw these people, I thought, oh, there must have been, more than one event today. No, they were all coming into the event that I was doing, essentially participating in. And I will tell you, in that moment, I could feel it now. My palms are getting sweaty that moment, because all of a sudden, somehow, the belief of being able to speak to 50 people was okay, but 500 was out of my scope. And I literally had to go into the restroom and breathe my way through it, because I don't know what the difference really was for me. But all of a sudden I was like, I can't do that. I can't do that. That's what I kept saying. I can't do that. I can't talk to all these people. How am I going to, how am I, like, holy crap. And guess what? I had no choice. I had to go forward, right? I couldn't fake a seizure in the bathroom and say, oh, sorry, she's out. I didn't want to do that. But what it showed me was that the story that came through was my imposter syndrome. It really was. The surprise thrust me into this moment of, I wasn't saying, holy cow, I can tell you that for a fact, but I was petrified. And it was just simply because I didn't know I could do it. I hadn't done an audience. I hadn't been in front of an audience that large up to that point. So this is the thing. It is really sneaky. And I think for the people who are listening, you said it amazingly. It's like, if you are not qualified, so if you are misrepresenting your qualifications or your experience or something that would make a difference, right? I don't care if you go home and you live like a hoarder, right? If you can get in front of people and make a difference for and with them, then that's none of anybody's business. But if you are misrepresenting who you are professionally, you might want to check that. But when you're in it, because every day that you're a coach, you're going to learn something. And it's kind of like an escalator that never ends. There's always going to be a higher level from where you are. That doesn't mean you're not qualified to reach for it. I'd rather be the surgeon that's done 300 surgeries than the first, but I don't want to know.
There's a huge difference between faking it and embodying who you want to be showing up as in the world. Because faking it is like pretending. It's very much recognizing I'm not that, I'm going to pretend to be that, and you are aware that you're lying to yourself and to other people. Whereas when you decide to embody who you really want to be showing up as in the world, that's very much a thing of, well, I'm not pretending I am this. I'm just choosing to show up in this way. I want to show up as this version of myself, not to lie about who I am. I'm still going to be honest about, I don't know, about where I am financially or where I am professionally, but I want to show up with the energy and the attitude and as this version of myself who I want to be. So it's not lying to other people. It's really about stepping into the you want to be in the future, trying to be more that now. So I think there is a difference, and it may be kind of like a fine line for some people, but you're not trying to lie to people. You're just trying to show up as a better version of yourself that you want to be showing up as in the world. So there is a difference.
I don't even think we could know that. Yeah. Yes, there is a distinction, but that, to your point, I don't even think we could know how good we can be until we do the thing. So my example plays in perfectly here. I expected one thing, and and when I went out onto that stage, and I literally think I was probably ready to pee myself. I was like, because now seeing everybody from that visual perspective was even worse than what I didn't thought it was going to be when I was in the restroom breathing and trying to get myself together. And I was honest. I was like, wow. First thing after they, hey, this is Angie, blah, 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 and all the thing. After they calmed down, I paused for a minute because I was like, oh shit, I don't know what to say. And I was like, wow, there are so many more of you than I thought were going to be here. And that's just awesome. And I just went with it there, like kind of had to embrace that as a positive and just go with it. But what that did in that moment was brought me to a new level. right? Brought me to a different experience that I'd ever had.
Mm.
And I just did it anyway. So I don't know. I didn't get up there and misrepresent myself and say, wow, this is not such a big, what do you mean? Like, I didn't try to
Right.
minimize anything. I was really like, this is pretty incredible to do this. And I think that you're right, that there is a fine line to faking it, because if I envisioned that day, I was coaching 500 people, which I had never done. And it's not that I was faking it, I was doing it.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
So look, but here's where maybe maybe this might make it even clearer for you. Like when I first got into the world of personal development, I would even say there were a lot of people who were teaching that fake it till you make it philosophy. Maybe you had that experience as well, but I certainly think
Yes.
late 80s, early 90s, 2000s, there were people who were teaching fake it till you make it. I would see people roll up to personal development events in a flash car, fancy suits, all the things, who were flat broke and wanting to
No.
represent themselves as being millionaires or multimillionaires. They wanted people to think that they were something special. And a number of people got themselves into huge amounts of debt trying to do that. That was faking it and definitely not making it. Fake it till you make it. It
Yeah.
actually doesn't work because they were lying to themselves and others, racking up debt. But then there were people who were showing up and not pretending to be someone else, or not trying to deceive anyone into thinking that they were something they were not. They were just showing up with a really strong, great energy, wanting to be a part of things, wanting to be that better version of themselves, and showing up and participating and being noticed. And that is really the thing of, that's more the sort of embodiment aspect that I'm talking about. It's like you show up as the best version of yourself that you can manage to be in that moment, rather than trying to convince people that you are something you're not. Or I don't know if that makes it any clearer, but hopefully that's
Well, I mean,
some of
listen,
my
because
insight
I
from that
think,
time.
well, I think that because this is such a subjective topic, right? There's no way for you and I to say to our audience, it's this, and it's this every single time, right? That's not the way it works, because as I tried to convey earlier, right, it is sneaky. And I think sometimes being nervous about getting on a stage is not imposter syndrome. It's normal. Or getting nervous about, your first session with a client, right, is a little unnerving at times. I don't think I'm as nervous as I used to be. Like now I just welcome in and it's just what I do. But does that mean I was faking it before when I was unsure and unsettled? No, it means I grew, I learned, I experienced. And so what we have to be able to do is manage those thoughts and beliefs when they present themselves, and really do a check-in, right? Really be able to say, okay, is it that I'm lying, or am I misrepresenting myself? And then this, is it true? Just because I haven't done this yet does not mean that I'm faking it. It just means that it's part of my process and my journey as a coach, right?
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Well, look, I've just finished reading a book called The Alter Ego Effect by Todd Herman. And fascinating book, because it really is about creating this version of yourself, or this, like a part of yourself, an alter ego for yourself, who can be and show up the way that you really want to in a certain situation. So if like you're struggling with doubt or certainty on the football pitch, for example, you can create this alter ego for yourself who just goes for it and is focused and in the flow. It's still you. It's not, again, not misrepresenting. Same as if you're a coach or a speaker, you can create this kind of alter ego version of yourself that is just, this is how I want to be showing up. These are the attributes and the qualities that I want this version of myself to be showing up as. And you can step into that. And so, maybe it's a bit of acting. All right, well, it is stepping out of your limitations that you have created for yourself, the boundaries of your personality. Is giving yourself that opportunity to step into another personality. And that offers liberation and freedom. I've often thought about this with drag queens, funnily enough.
Have you now?
I have. Not that I've dabbled. So it's not really for me. But I see how For some people, drag has been an opportunity to find and open up aspects of themselves that they weren't able to do outside of drag, has allowed them to access this alter ego, this character that can allow them to be who they really want to be and show up in a much more empowered way in the world and life. We all have different kinds of drag available to us. It doesn't have to be that we dress up as the opposite sex or
Mhm.
that we need to go on
Yeah.
RuPaul's Drag Race or anything like that. This is the alter ego kind of thing is to some degree a personality kind of drag of we're dressing up. We're dressing ourselves up, not literally, not physically, but emotionally as who we want to be
Mhm.
showing up as, that we can step outside of our limitations. So I think that could be a great thing to use as a tool for working with clients who are struggling with imposter syndrome. And even for ourselves as coaches, if we are coming into that as well, that we can have this work or professional version of ourselves that we can turn on when we're doing our work and turn off when we're not, because we all have different aspects to
Absolutely.
our personality. So I think that could be a really, hopefully a really useful tool. But I see it come up a lot in coaching conversations. And certainly having done a lot of work with people who want to grow coaching businesses and people who want to be professional speakers, just regularly, like almost a daily
Here,
thing that has come up in sessions, right? Of the imposter, the am I really good
absolutely.
enough for this? Will people
But
pay
here's
me
the
for this?
thing, though. Yeah, but here's the thing. I think that what happens, and this is something that people who are listening and who are maybe new or newer to the profession, is that there's usually an excitement. Most people don't start, coming out of high school saying, I want to be a coach most of the time, right? There's usually experiences and observations that they make over
Sure.
time that say, I didn't. I had no idea. Like coaching when I was into it was about, football and a sport. So what happens is there's usually this excitement. Once there's this realization and an awareness of like, I want to be a coach, there's excitement. We envision like all of these possibilities and helping people. And it's only when I feel like we start putting like the practice, I've watched people spend what feels like an eternity, like an exorbitant amount of time trying to get my website needs to be right and this needs to be right and all my
Yeah.
pieces need to be in place before I can.
Yeah.
I didn't have a website when I started coaching. I didn't have that when I was I was workshopping before I was one-to-one, right? I was
Yeah.
doing groups and that's just how it happened for me. So I think that that's where this is something that I'm just saying I've seen often is there's excitement, and there's momentum. And then all of a sudden, everything comes to a screeching halt because now it's time to actually be a
Yeah.
coach, not plan to be a coach. And I've seen people avoid, without even realizing it, do the job of a coach
Yeah.
and going, oh, I think I want to do this or I want to get this certification. And it's not, again, this is not about certifications or not. It's about the avoidance of, because there's some level of uncertainty. And I'm going to say it's not just nerves. There's an imposter syndrome story going on back there in the
Absolutely.
back of their minds.
It's always at that critical point where the world of imagination, if you like, where what's going on in your mind meets reality.
Yep.
So the
Yep.
point at which what your vision actually starts to become manifest in reality is the point where the rubber meets the road, and it's where a lot of people crash out. You
And they
mentioned
show up and you know what? I see it show. I'm so sorry. What the hell just
okay.
happened? Go ahead. Nope.
You mentioned perfectionism earlier. We mentioned we've been alluding to procrastination. The two are very related. I see
Very.
perfectionism as a form of procrastination. Get into that sort of paralysis situation where things just aren't moving forward, and the excuses start to come up. Or you say that I need this certification, or I got to have the website, I got to have the business cards. Like who the fuck really needs business cards? All of those things will start to come up for people, and they're just excuses. And they're coming up because of the doubt, because of the self-doubt. Can I really make this? Am I going to be successful in this? Like that's all the stuff that's bubbling up behind that. So as a coach, it's good for us to be able to notice that. And okay, to some degree, we're aiming to be somewhat diagnosing, even though it's not, even
Yeah.
though we know that imposter syndrome is not, it's not a pathology, it's not an actual syndrome, but we refer it as that. Then maybe there is a word that we should say that, but it's just become so ingrained as being imposter syndrome. We're going to keep referring to it as that because that is what everyone calls it. But even knowing that, we do need to still, as best we can, diagnose that as like this. I think this is what's going on. And again, we're not saying you've got a condition. We're just saying this might be what's going on behind here. Are you feeling? Do you have feelings of doubt that are coming about your ability to be successful or whatever with this? And then we want to dig into that and get curious about that.
I think that one of the things that I've used, it's just a simple tool. And I think, and I hope actually that people who are listening will take this. When you find that you are, and you know what, procrastination is not something that, all of these things are not so obvious. But if you set some realistic goals and you say, okay, I'm not reaching them, I want to be able to be coaching in 3 months. And now I'm, 9 months in going, oh, wait, let me do another certification or let me do another. This will make me more valid. We believe that. We actually believe our bullshit. So I think that there needs to come a point where we are able to become more familiar with identifying it, right? Because like I said at the beginning, there are still moments. It's very rare, but there are still moments where I do question. And it's always when I'm in a growth spurt. Always. It doesn't show up necessarily in a session, because if something is challenging or if I have a client who's like struggling, I love that. That to me is part of why we're doing what we're doing. That means I'm doing my job, right? If they're and it's hard. I just love that. Anyhow, but what I noticed for me, because I wanted to be aware that I knew I could feel that thing, that feeling of, and it's always been in a growth spurt, always. And I've had to ask myself, okay, so what's your problem, right? Now you're looking, instead of 500 people, you want to speak in front of 5,000. Can you do it? I don't know. There's the voice, or however it shows up. And what I'm getting at is to ask yourself if it's really true, right? It's really true. Do I really need this next certification? How important is it for me to get to this next level? Why do I want to get there? It's really, you have to learn how to check in with yourself so that you can stomp on, like literally visualize yourself stomping on this little gremlin, that the voice that plants that seed of, and not only plants it, but feeds it and nourishes it. You need to, we need to be able to recognize that. Otherwise, we kind of find ourselves staying, and that's usually what a lot of coaches will hire coaches, right? Like all of a sudden it's like, I'm a coach and I need a coach. And that's okay. I have a coach. You have a coach? Yeah.
Cool.
So it's hard, but it can be done.
Yeah. I do think it's important to ask yourself, can you get to where you want to get to without the certification, without the qualification, without the course or program that's up there in front of you saying, I have to do this first? Because if you can, then you should do that. You are putting it off. You can, there are things that are nice to have and there are things that are needs to have. And you need to be able to identify what's really necessary here and what is just something like, oh, I'll feel more confident about myself when I've got this. Or I'll tell you this. I worked with a coach one time and she's very good at what she was doing. And she said to me, I don't have any coaching certifications. And I said, well, okay, never mind. And she said, yeah, but I feel like a fraud without them, a phony without them. I was like, well, create your own, print your own certifications. And she said, really? Why would you say that? I said, because my certifications, not all of them, but a lot of my certifications are from companies that don't even exist anymore. They're not worth the paper they're written on. And I don't put them on my wall.
Right.
I have never once been asked in all my years of coaching to show my certification other than when I was going for a coaching position with a company.
Right.
That's the only
with an
time
organization.
with an organization. Yeah. That's the only time. No client
Mm-hmm.
has ever asked to see any of my certifications or who I was certified with. Now, you may find this, because there are different certifications now, and some of that is a little different in the coaching world. However, in terms of having your own business and working with clients, it's not really a relevant point. It's just that it just becomes a limitation. It's like, okay, well, if you genuinely feel that you can't be out there calling yourself a coach without having certifications and qualifications, then fine. And if you are completely inexperienced, naive, behind the ears and green, and you don't have the knowledge or experience to be able to really be effectively coaching people, then yeah, probably you should take a bit of time out and process through. But other than that, if you could be making a difference to people, you're just putting that off. You're really just putting it off
Oh,
and doing
absolutely.
a disservice to yourself and to your potential clients.
Absolutely. Here's the thing. If you want to beat imposter syndrome, just go do it. Go be a
Yeah.
coach. Go get your first client, your second, your 10th, your 15th. And then all of a sudden, again, not that it's never going to show up, but I think for people who are newer, it definitely, it just starts to play, that music keeps playing in the background. Just do it. You know what? If you feel like, I don't know if I can, then you need to go do it, because that is the only thing that will help get you to that next level of discomfort is your experience. I
Yeah.
mean, I would rather work with somebody who, think about it logically, right? I would rather work with somebody who has worked with 300 clients, let's just say, than somebody who's worked with 10 and has 300 other certifications. Those certifications don't really mean anything until you utilize them anyway. Otherwise, it's just knowledge. It's not practice. And the more you do, what happens is you're actually building your confidence simultaneously. So you will have that imposter syndrome moment or those moments much less often.
Yeah. It is
I
really
actually,
important to recognize with
no, no,
a
no, go ahead.
client, with a client, with someone who you're working with, it is really important to try and recognize if this is what might be coming up for them, so that you can help them through this situation and encourage them to take the action and to keep going anyway. Remind them that it's actually not a bad thing that they're feeling this. It's a good sign that they want to do really well, that they want to show up and do a great job, and that they want people to be impressed. We want to believe in ourselves the way we think other people seem to be hopefully believing in us. It's very good to want these things. There is an upside to imposter syndrome of those doubts are coming up because we want to deliver, we want to do well. And it's our fears of not doing that. But you made a great point about that sort of, it comes up at these growth points, these growth periods, because those are the points where it starts to get painful, where it starts to get really challenging. And that's the point where people will tap out more often than not, because then it starts to get a bit real. And then they'll probably move on to the next shiny object, because that's a lot easier
Yeah.
than actually trying to see something through and go through that growth, because growth is painful.
I wanted to bring this up because it's true. Growth is like, let me just do something else. And then that keeps us busy. We love busy. Busy makes us feel empowered.
Yeah.
But I want to point out something also that I've seen very often. And I'm curious as to whether or not you will agree. I know we're getting really long on time and this just jumped into my head magically. But I have experienced myself, but I've experienced it a ton with my own coaching clients that were coaches or looking to become coaches, who felt that they had no business coaching somebody on something, a topic or a situation that they themselves were still struggling with.
Yeah.
That's huge. That happens a lot because you and I both know that when we put on our coaching drag, if you will, that much of it is very natural. Really, like for me, I feel like I know I'm a coach. It's just who I am at heart. It's what I do. And it's not something I learned. I've finessed it. But I think that, it's hard for people to get past that because they feel like, what business do I have? Really, literally, if I can't, and let's just say, if I can't navigate this type of communication, if that's my worst trait as a human, by the way, it's communication. And this person is literally like struggling to communicate, whether it's at work or at home or whatever. They're very well may be this kind of mindset of like, well, fuck, I can't help you. I can't even help myself. That's not true. right? So what do you think of that? Have you experienced that or with clients?
Yeah. A number of times, not all the time, but a number of times. And very often I don't know if you find this, but sometimes I find that there'll be themes that just keep coming up in my coaching, and like unconnected clients having similar issues or similar things coming up for them. And
Does that
often there'll be things that I'm dealing with myself. Does that mean I
right?
can't coach them on that? No. I end up coaching myself at the same time. That's what happens. So I'm coaching
Yeah,
them,
it can
and
happen like that. Yeah.
they're putting me in that position where I have detachment from their stuff, so I can coach them on that, and I'm coaching them. And in the same time, that's reflecting back on me because I'm coaching myself too.
Notice the word that John just used is detachment, right? If we get so absorbed into the client's space that we're sharing the space instead of keeping ourselves kind of at a distance with that bird's eye view, yes, it is very hard because we're looking at them going, hey, misery loves company. I suck too. Not that we're going to say that, right? I'm struggling here as well. But it absolutely does not mean that you cannot coach them through something. And yes, I've actually had it happen and kind of thought to myself, well, geez, I don't know how to do this. And then, yes, I did, because I stepped back into my coaching, right, drag and got out of the other space that I allowed myself to fall into. So, do you always have to have everything dialed in order to be a great coach or to elevate a client or help them get past? No, absolutely not. But what you need to do is absolutely maintain that distance, right,
Mm,
between the two of you.
yeah.
And that will help you. And it's great. Like, I mean, I've had moments as well where watching somebody else or navigating through something with a client over a period of time has helped me as well. Absolutely. And I also think that if I literally had to every session that I've ever done, given whatever, I'd have absolutely learned something about myself or something that I might want to carry into another session or as into like, that's a really good process or that was a really good. So I think it's just allowing that flexibility of you're not going to have it dialed in every minute of every session, every time, and giving yourself some grace to step away from the situation and say, okay, what do I need to do? Because I am the pace car here. I am the
Yeah.
authority, if you will, in the dynamic.
Yeah. Look, I agree with that. I think there are times when I've been coaching clients where it has put me in even more of a position where I thought, if I am to remain in my integrity as a coach, I need to do this myself. I need to take
Mhm.
action. And that sometimes has been more powerful, more motivating to me than my own coach or coaches that I've worked with.
Yeah.
You know, as I say, is it self-coaching? Kind of, but it is and it isn't. It is just like hearing your own words back. Most of us have the ability to coach other people in some way, shape, or form. Certainly, if we have any level of empathy, we can coach other people. There are specific kinds of coaching, and there's general kinds of coaching, and some people are better at it than others, whatever. But nearly always we learn something about ourselves in that process, and we coach
Yeah.
ourselves a little bit as well. That's all good.
Listen, and this kind of goes back to like previous episodes where we talked about building rapport versus having results, you know what I mean, instead of being results driven. And I think sometimes it's natural. I've seen it when I've coached or I've trained, sorry, other coaches where they're in the middle of a call and somebody says, this is my situation, whatever it is. This is where I'm struggling today. And the coach goes beyond empathy, right? And saying, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss or whatever the situation is, and stays there, right? They stay in that building a rapport because they are either there or have been there and they don't look to like help get them out of that space. And that's where it's easy to get lost. We're all human, right? We all want to, we want to relate to people, but you have a job to do. And your job is to maintain the dynamic of that session. You know what I mean?
There
Oh,
are there have been times particularly noticed it in some group coaching sessions, especially ones where I haven't been the only coach on the call as well, where I almost felt bad about how detached I can be in certain
Oh,
situations.
yeah, that's a good one, John.
It's interesting, isn't it? And so
Yeah.
something we can perhaps come back to. Maybe this the whole thing of detachment is an episode in itself. But yeah, I've ended up feeling bad about that. But in one-to-one, I try to keep that level of detachment. And I'll go into stuff if I really feel that I have to. But I don't need to really be deeply empathizing. I don't need to be crying with my client if they're crying. I need to be the source of solace for them. It's either we can continue with the session or we can't. But if I get into it with them, that session is not continuing. If I'm crying on the call with them, we're done. The session's pretty much just a pity fest, a cry fest, or whatever it needs to be. That's not a good coaching session. And if that kind of happened in group calls as well, and I've had this situation where emotional stuff has come up for one or two people in a group call, and it's like, if we get into this, we're going to derail the call, and I will stay detached. It's like, I don't know, but it actually has made me feel bad that I am moving us forward. I'm not being pulled into the emotion of this. I'm not unsympathetic. This isn't what we're here for.
I think
If
that
they can't,
listen, you're saying this and you're right. I want listeners to realize and understand you're not it's when you pull people, when you move the sessions forward, group coaching or one-to-one, that you're still doing it with grace, with heart, and with care. You're not
oh yeah,
going, okay, well, I think the crying isn't going to help us today. Let's move forward. No, that's not,
stop
yeah, you're laughing because I
crying,
don't
you
want
little whinger.
to, there's no crying in baseball. What are you doing? Right. But no, right. There's a way to honor somebody and say, hey, listen, I'm sorry for this, or whatever it is, and honor where they're at. And sometimes I've even had to ask, but I've been in that situation exactly like you were. I come up from a call and said, natural Angie, human Angie, wanted to reach through and hold them and hug them because I
Right.
feel so much empathy. I care so much about them as human, but I can't. That is not my job. That's another skill, by the way.
Yeah.
Learning how to navigate through that, I think, is it's an amazing skill because it doesn't always happen when something is sad, right?
Yeah.
Somebody could come in and be like, I had a great this weekend and it was all about the weekend. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. So like, it's not that $500 cup of coffee you're looking. I think it's a skill
Yeah.
to learn and hone on a regular basis.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of aspects of emotional intelligence that relate to this, and that would be something for us to look at another time. But yeah,
It is.
it's interesting stuff. I think we've done reasonable justice to our topic today. What do you think?
I think we've done. I mean, let me ask you, let's just like wrap it up with a little bow here. What do you think is for you, your number one habit, technique, or skill that helps you navigate, right, imposter syndrome if it shows up?
With a climb,
Yeah.
I would say that I am able to get them to helicopter out of their situation and look at the reality. Like, we're going to look at what's really going on for them, and there's going to be some questions around what are the doubts, what's the worry here, and then we'll start to question the reality of it as well. And then there's going to
Yeah.
be an element of gentle challenge to them, with like, let's get you moving, because I know that the way through this is to take action, even with all the fear, the anxiety, the doubt, is to get you in action and moving forward. Like, the answer to a lot of things in life is to keep taking action and keep moving forward. And that's where I want to get them to. I want them to get into some momentum with this and get out
Mhm.
of the stuck feelings. So I would say
Yeah.
that's it, is get them moving forward.
Yeah. I agree. Action is the cure for all things evil in the coaching world.
So often the case. But I like, well, one of my friends, Suraj, said this to me when I was interviewing him on my podcast, my other podcast one time. He finds imposter syndrome very reassuring, that it gives him a sense of his purpose and his mission, and that he's challenging himself, that he should be feeling that, because it's like he's challenging himself to step up and be put himself out there and make a difference. It's like, great. I love that. I love that framing on imposter syndrome. It's like, it's not a bad thing to have coming up.
Yeah, no, as long as I think people learn how to manage it and not deter them too much. And listen, and it's okay. Sometimes coaching isn't, by the way, coaching isn't for everybody, right? It's kind of like, I thought it was this, it's not, and I don't really want to do it, and that's okay too. So, yeah.
Just throw that in there. And look, what are your thoughts listening into this episode? What are your thoughts on imposter syndrome or imposterism, whatever we want to call it, the imposter effect? What do you think? What are your questions? Have you struggled to coach people on this? Has this episode helped you? Do you have other questions that you'd like to ask me or Angie? You can let us know. The best way to do that is to contact us. You can leave us a voicemail. It's completely free. Go to speakpipe.com, /the Coaching Clinic podcast, and you can leave us a voicemail there. And if we like it, and we like your message, we might just feature you on the show.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
But that's pretty much it for this week from the Coaching Clinic. We'll be back very soon with another awesome episode. We'll see you then.
Bye.